Hey, what is up everybody? It's Animac here for Anime Uproar, and after the biggest battle in the 4 Knights of the Apocalypse manga so far, we now know how strong all 4 knights are, and we know how they stack up in relation to each other. This battle was absolutely insane. Not only did it feature the 4 knights and their allies fighting former members of the 10 Commandments and the main villain, King Arthur, but even King Meliodas himself joined this battle and he was almost defeated, which is just crazy. The 7 Deadly Sins sequel manga is really on fire right now, so in this video I will break down the powers and abilities of all 4 Knights of the Apocalypse, and I will rank them from weakest to strongest based on all the information that we have so far. You guys know what to do if you want to see more 7 Deadly Sins and 4 Knights of the Apocalypse content here on the channel. Leave a quick like and comment right now to help me out with that YouTube algorithm. And I know that the majority of you guys who watch this channel are not yet subscribed. Remember that if you don't subscribe and click that bell to turn on all notifications, you're gonna miss a ton of our videos in the future. That's just how YouTube works. Do me a quick favor and subscribe right now. It's completely free and it helps me out a lot. Finally, this video will contain 4 Knights of the Apocalypse manga spoilers. I will be using all the information that we have so far, so please proceed with caution. You have been warned. For those who are still new to the 7 Deadly Sins sequel manga, or who might just be reading casually, the 4 Knights of the Apocalypse are 16-year-old teenagers who are destined to have a massive impact on the world of Britannia, at least according to an important prophecy. King Arthur and the Holy Knights of Camelot believe that these 4 knights are destined to destroy the world, and they want to eliminate them before they have a chance to bring about the apocalypse. Essentially, the Knights of Camelot are trying to take out the threat before it becomes a bigger threat by taking out the knights while they are still inexperienced teenagers. However, the people of Leones refer to these 4 knights as the 4 Knights of Prophecy, and in Leones, the 4 knights are prophesied to become saviors of the world, not its destroyers. The kingdoms of Camelot and Leones are currently at war, and their radically different opinion of the 4 knights reflects their respective allegiances. In Camelot, the 4 Knights of the Apocalypse are seen as enemies, and in Leones, they are seen as allies. In fact, King Meliodas went out of his way to gather all 4 knights in Leones, and that is exactly where they are when the big battle against former commandments and King Arthur breaks out. Now let's get into the rankings. It goes without saying that all 4 Knights of Apocalypse are exceptionally strong compared to the normal inhabitants of Britannia, and they all have extremely powerful and interesting magical abilities. That said, the weakest of the 4 Knights of the Apocalypse at this early stage of the story is Gawain. Gawain is the only female member of the group, and she was the last knight to be introduced to the story in chapter 58. According to the prophecy, Gawain is the Knight of Famine who possesses gold-colored magic. The words gold-colored magic is actually a reference to sunshine, the divine grace that was originally possessed by Mael and later inherited by Escanor. Gawain somehow inherited the power after Escanor died in the original 7 Deadly Sins manga, although we still don't know how exactly she came into possession of this power. Although they are very different characters in many ways, Gawain and Escanor do share some similarities. They are both cocky and egotistical when they are in their daytime form. Their bodies change drastically depending on the time of day. They both refer to themselves as the Master of the Sun. And Gawain uses a weapon called Sacred Sword Rita, which is clearly a reference to Escanor's divine axe, Rita. Even though we don't yet know how Gawain came to possess sunshine, we do know that she is the niece of King Arthur Pendragon. This is interesting since Arthur is the ruler of Camelot and the main villain of the series so far. And yet, Gawain doesn't seem to be loyal to Arthur or Camelot. At some point, Gawain decided to run away from Camelot, and she is now seen as an enemy and a traitor by King Arthur. Due to the fact that she possesses sunshine, Gawain has absolutely incredible physical power, and she likes to dominate her enemies using brute force. Beyond sunshine, Gawain also possesses incredible magical abilities, which makes her an extremely stacked fighter in theory. She is able to use strong spells like Absolute Cancel to cancel out a perfect cube. And she can use advanced teleportation magic to instantly teleport from one spot to another. She can also teleport inanimate objects from one location to another instantly, such as instantly teleporting a weapon into her opponent's body. These are of course highly advanced magical spells, and since she is a native of Camelot where Merlin currently resides, I am inclined to believe that she may have been personally trained by Merlin at some point in the past. I can't imagine that a powerful wizard like Merlin wouldn't be intimately familiar with someone who possesses both sunshine and advanced magical techniques like Absolute Cancel. Especially since Gawain is also a blood relative of King Arthur, and Merlin and Arthur are still close, or at least they appear to be. Merlin is definitely connected to Gawain in some way, we just need to find out how. Ever since Arthur was revealed to be a villain in the story, I've been wondering why Merlin would still be standing by his side and seemingly supporting him in his attempt to eliminate everyone who isn't human. Knowing Merlin and the fact that she herself is not exactly human, this just didn't make sense. So I've been speculating that maybe Arthur's mind was corrupted by the power of chaos, and Merlin has been secretly working behind his back in order to stop him. Perhaps Merlin trained Gawain and then helped her escape Camelot because Merlin wants to fulfill the prophecy of the 4 Knights of the Apocalypse, since they might be the only ones who can stop Chaos Arthur. We'll have to see if this theory pans out, but I do think that there is a secret connection between Merlin and Gawain that will be revealed later on in the story. Now moving on. Unfortunately for Gawain, even with sunshine and all those impressive magical skills, she is still the weakest out of the 4 Knights of the Apocalypse. Her moves are still too basic and predictable, and she is not a very skilled or experienced fighter at this stage in the story. Even with sunshine, Gawain can still be defeated by an experienced Holy Knight with superior fighting techniques, as proven by Holy Knight of Camelot Pelargard, who successfully takes her down pretty quickly. Gawain is also highly undisciplined and egotistical, especially the first time we meet her. She thinks that she is the best and the strongest, and she refuses to listen to orders from anyone, even if obeying those orders would be for her own good. After she loses to Pelargard in battle, Gawain is in complete denial and she throws a tantrum like a child. She calms down only after Tristan gives her a bunch of false compliments in order to satiate her raging ego. To be fair, after her defeat to Pelargard, Gawain does recover, and soon after she fights bravely against Chaos Galland and Chaos Melascula, but in the end she is defeated by them as well. Once that happens, her massive muscular body shrinks and she assumes the form of a small, childlike girl. This small form is her true form, and she was actually using the power of sunshine to make her body large and muscular. When she overuses this power, as she did in the fight against Galland and Melascula, she reverts back to her original form. Overall, Gawain has a ton of potential, and the combination of possessing sunshine and being able to use advanced magic could make her one of the strongest characters in the entire series at some point in the future. She's almost like what would happen if Escanor and Merlin had a daughter, which is something to think about. That said, Gawain still has a long way to go in order to truly master the power of sunshine, and she is not even close to the power level of former sunshine users Mael and Escanor. She also has a lot of work to do when it comes to disciplining herself and reining in her own ego. Until she makes some serious improvements in that regard, she'll remain at number 4 on our list. At number 3, we have the main protagonist of our story, Percival. Percival is the first Knight of the Apocalypse that we meet at the very beginning, and according to the prophecy, he is the Knight of Death. He has a very unique appearance, as his hair is green and shaped like a pair of wings, his eyes are purple, and he looks like a 10-year-old kid even though he's actually 16. He also often wears his grandpa's big old helmet, a helmet which is clearly too big for his head, and this adds to the uniqueness of his appearance. Percival was raised by his grandpa in total isolation from the outside world atop a giant pillar-shaped mountain. Percival's grandpa is actually a former Holy Knight of Camelot, and he spent countless hours training a young Percival to become a powerful warrior. This training started when Percival was only 3 years old, and it ended when Percival's father Ironside, another Holy Knight of Camelot, suddenly showed up and killed Percival's grandfather. After that, Percival set out on a journey to avenge his grandpa, and so his isolation from the outside world came to an abrupt end. As Percival ventures into the outside world and begins to interact with other people, he slowly begins to discover and develop his unique magical abilities. Percival possesses a lot more strength and durability than an ordinary human. In addition, Percival seems to have enhanced resistance against drugs and other types of potions, and he has above average lung capacity, due in part to the fact that he grew up at a very high altitude. On top of his impressive physical skills and combat capabilities, things that he developed through many years of training with his grandpa, Percival also discovers that he possesses a very rare and unique type of magic called hope. Hope is magic that is powered by the hope of the user's allies, and by the faith that the allies place in the user. You know those memes about the power of friendship in anime and manga? Well, this is literally that. Pellegard believes that hope is an extremely rare type of magic known as hero-type magic, which manifests in only a very small number of people. Hope magic enables Percival to generate a magical aura around his body or parts of his body, and he can then manipulate that aura in a variety of different ways. For example, the magical aura allows him to defend himself by acting as his shield and reducing the damage from enemy attacks. It also enhances his own physical strength when he is the one doing the attacking, and it can even heal life-threatening injuries almost instantly. The aura can also assume different shapes and forms, such as turning itself into a pair of wings and allowing Percival to literally fly. On top of that, hope magic can absorb the magic attacks of others and shoot them back at the attacker, and Percival is also able to use hope magic to create a bunch of chibi clones. These chibi clones have a will of their own, and they assist Percival whenever he finds himself in a tough spot. The clones also have the ability to heal Percival's injuries and the injuries of his allies. And as powerful and versatile as all of these magic powers are, we're not even done yet. There is still more to Percival's powers and abilities. For example, he possesses the ability to instantly drain all the fluid out of a living being just by touching the person directly, basically mummifying that part of the person's body that Percival had come into direct contact with. Percival first demonstrated this ability when he was in a state of extraordinary agitation and despair, as he falsely believed that his friends had just been killed. Normal healing magic cannot even reverse the effects of this strange mummification. Not even goddess healing magic can reverse it, and so only Percival's own hope magic seems capable of reversing its effects. Interestingly enough, Percival is able to speak the language of demons, although no one seems to know why, not even Percival. We still don't know who Percival's mother is, by the way. And this might be a hint that Percival may not be just an ordinary human and that he may be of mixed race heritage, like maybe he is part demon. We'll have to wait and see. Anyway, Percival currently possesses the legendary sword Dragon Handle, which once belonged to Meliodas. Dragon Handle is also one part of the Coffin of Eternal Darkness, which is something we learned back in the original 7 Deadly Sins series. This once broken sword was repaired and turned into a fully functioning sword by Hauser, and Percival has now learned to use hope magic to enhance the power of the sword. As the main character in the story and the guy with literally the power of friendship on his side, Percival has the most potential out of anyone to become the strongest character in the entire manga. But at this point in time, he still lacks experience as a holy knight, and he is still learning to understand and control his magic. While Percival still has more self-control than Gawain does, and for that reason he would probably defeat her in battle, he still doesn't have the combat experience and technical skill that Tristan and Lancelot possess. And for that reason he remains at number 3 on our list. At number 2, we have the son of Meliodas and Elizabeth and the prophesized Knight of Pestilence, Prince Tristan. When he appears in chapter 54 of the sequel manga, Tristan is already an experienced holy knight and he has a platoon of holy knights under his command. This platoon has a very original name, by the way, the Tristan Platoon. We know that Tristan has been exceptionally strong and skilled in combat ever since he was a child. And what really makes him unique is the fact that he inherited both goddess and demon powers from his parents. This makes him a special kind of creature in the world of the 7 Deadly Sins and its sequel, a Nephilim. Tristan is even able to manifest both demon and goddess powers at the same time, which is something that we haven't seen since the days of Mael/Estarossa. And even then, Tristan is still different because unlike Mael, Tristan is literally the child of one of the strongest demons and one of the strongest goddesses in history. It's interesting to note that Tristan uses 2 swords in battle. One sword is black and the other is white. In one of the question corners, author Nakaba Suzuki revealed that Tristan's 2 swords are actually named Mael and Estarossa. Tristan has access to goddess magic, such as summoning large angelic wings that allow him to fly, using unbelievably powerful healing abilities, and using other standard goddess powers like Arc. Most of the time, Tristan prefers to rely on his goddess powers alone, but when he is pushed to the point where he can't win by using only goddess powers, he is able to tap into his demon side. When he taps into his demonic powers, Tristan's eyes turn black and a large demon mark appears on his forehead. This demon mode makes Tristan a lot more powerful, but it's also much harder to turn off and to control. In this form, Tristan kind of goes berserk, and he makes rash and risky decisions that he would not have made otherwise. For example, Demon Mode Tristan tries to fight King Arthur head-on despite clear warnings that he still isn't strong enough to defeat him. And then Tristan's father Meliodas is forced to intervene and risk his own life in order to protect his son from Arthur. I believe that Tristan in his demon mode is clearly stronger than Percival and Gawain at this point in time. For example, once he awakens his demon mode, Tristan is able to easily destroy the fusion of Melascula and Galand, even though no one on the battlefield was able to do any significant damage to them before that. And that includes Percival and Gawain. But it is clear that Tristan still hasn't mastered his demon mode, and that he has a long way to go before he reaches his full potential. In fact, he actively avoids using his demon mode because he knows that he can't control it. And he knows that this mode makes him act out in ways that are both abnormal and dangerous. Because he is the son of one of the strongest goddesses and one of the strongest demons in history, and because he possesses the ability to use both demon and goddess powers at the same time, Tristan has absolutely incredible potential, and he is definitely a contender for becoming one of the strongest characters in the entire series at some point in the future. But for now, we know that he isn't the strongest Knight of the Apocalypse because Tristan himself confirms it in chapter 80 of the manga. Speaking directly to Percival, Tristan says that he and Lancelot were evenly matched in power until about 6 years ago. That is when Lancelot mysteriously disappeared from the kingdom of Benwick. When he returned 3 years later, he seemed fine as if nothing had happened. But there was one massive change in Lancelot. He had somehow attained a terrifying new strength and magical power. And Lancelot's strength is currently already on par with the legendary 7 Deadly Sins from the original manga. Tristan openly admits that Lancelot's power is far beyond his own. And so it's time to talk about the strongest Knight of the Apocalypse, the son of Bon and Elaine, Lancelot. Lancelot is the Knight of War, according to the prophecy, and because he is half fairy, he has the unique ability to shapeshift. Lancelot has actually been around since like chapter 2 of the sequel manga, but we didn't realize at first that it was him because all the way up to chapter 47 he was taking the form of a talking fox named Sin. If you were a fan of the original 7 Deadly Sins, which I would assume that most of us are, then you know that Lancelot was first introduced in chapter 346.5 of the original manga. That chapter tells the story of how at the age of 10, Lancelot and his trainer Jericho disappeared from Benwick as a result of strange magic. Magic that is probably related to the Lady of the Lake because, spoiler alert, Nakaba borrows a lot from Arthurian legend. And in Arthurian legend, Lancelot spends several years being raised by the Lady of the Lake. As we learned from Tristan, Lancelot went missing 6 years ago and he was missing for 3 years. But then he returned as if nothing happened, except he was suddenly a lot more powerful. And I am willing to bet that this power-up is linked to the Lady of the Lake in some way. But let's move on. When he finally reveals his true identity in the 4 Knights of the Apocalypse manga, Lancelot explains to Percival and the others that he is actually in the service of Meliodas, the King of Leones. Lancelot is basically a secret agent working directly for Meliodas, and his mission is to locate all the Knights of the Apocalypse and bring them to Leones, where they will meet the king. The more we learn about Lancelot, the more we realize just how incredibly strong and skilled of a warrior he is. And yet, despite this, most people have no idea who he is. They haven't even heard any rumors about him, despite the fact that he is such a strong warrior who happens to only be 16 years of age, and that is something that people would certainly want to talk about. But the reason why there are no rumors about Lancelot is because he makes sure that none of the enemies who face him in battle will ever live to tell the tale. He straight up eliminates all of his enemies after defeating them, which is pretty ruthless. But it is also incredibly useful in his line of work. After all, he is essentially a secret agent who operates in the shadows using many different forms and identities. And if people start talking about him and he becomes famous, then he would no longer be able to carry out his important missions. We know that even as a 10-year-old kid, Lancelot had above average physical strength, superior reflexes, and exceptional combat capabilities. As I mentioned earlier, his power used to be on par with Tristan, and then he disappeared and came back much stronger. Along with the ability to shapeshift, Lancelot's connection to the Fairy Clan also gives him the ability to read the minds of his opponents, which is a power known as heart reading. This ability is extremely useful in battle because it allows Lancelot to anticipate his opponent's next move. And since his opponents usually don't know anything about him having a connection to the Fairy Clan, Lancelot's ability to read them usually catches them completely off guard. In addition, Lancelot is also a very skilled archer, and he uses a bow and arrow with unbelievable speed and accuracy. His offensive capabilities are absolutely devastating, and we saw this early on as he was able to instantly kill Doronak, one of the Holy Knights of Camelot, with just one punch to the gut. And if that wasn't enough, Lancelot has a magical ability called Shining Road, which allows him to fire a beam of light at an opponent. This beam will then chase after its target and follow it like a heat-seeking missile until it destroys it. Lancelot's true power becomes apparent in chapter 79 when he takes on King Arthur one-on-one. And this is after Arthur already outclassed Tristan and after he even managed to gain the upper hand on Meliodas. Although to be fair, Meliodas was being held back by the fact that he was protecting his out-of-control son. Lancelot ends up intervening to stop Meliodas from being killed by Arthur, and then he goes toe-to-toe with Arthur himself. Lancelot actually lands several powerful blows on Arthur, causing serious injury and forcing Arthur to activate the power of chaos in order to regenerate. Although I guess technically the power of chaos activates itself when it senses that its host is in danger. So Arthur doesn't even have to do anything consciously. Chaos instinctively acts to protect him. At this point, Arthur confirms that Meliodas at full power is still stronger than Lancelot. But there is no doubt that Lancelot is the strongest of the 4 Knights of the Apocalypse, at least for now. In fact, Meliodas and Tristan seemed hopeful that even with the power of chaos actively protecting Arthur, Lancelot may still have a chance to defeat him. I mean, that is just an incredible level of confidence that Meliodas and Tristan have in Lancelot's power. But before Lancelot can force a battle to the death with Arthur, the Holy Knights of Camelot arrive on the scene inside like a flying monster ship that appears in the sky above Leones. Arthur then warps up to the ship and the ship disappears before Lancelot and the others can stop them. But as he departs, Arthur declares all-out war, and he vows to hunt down the 4 Knights of the Apocalypse and their allies and to eradicate them all. That is pretty intense, and there we have it. The 4 Knights of the Apocalypse ranked from weakest to strongest based on all the information that we have thus far. All 4 of them have rare and unique powers and incredible potential, and it is possible that these rankings might shift sometime in the near future. Personally, I was surprised to learn that Lancelot was already on the level of the legendary 7 Deadly Sins from the original manga. Especially since we know that he's only a 16-year-old kid. But that also makes things more interesting, since Lancelot proves that we won't have to wait hundreds of chapters for the 4 Knights of the Apocalypse to reach the level that the 7 Deadly Sins were at the end of the original manga. Things are moving very quickly in the sequel, and we can expect the action to intensify now that King Arthur has declared all-out war against the 4 Knights of the Apocalypse. The 4 Knights are now assembled. The battle lines have been drawn, and I can't wait to see what happens next. I'm especially interested to see the other Sins return to the story, including of course Bon, Diane, and King. Based on recent events and clues in the latest chapters, we can expect all of them to appear soon, which is awesome. Let me know what you guys think. Do you agree with my rankings? And if not, where would you place the 4 Knights in terms of current strength and power level? Where do you think the story is going to go from here? Don't forget to comment down below. I always love hearing from you. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more 7 Deadly Sins and 4 Knights of the Apocalypse content here on the channel, leave a quick like to help me out with that YouTube algorithm. And if you haven't taken the time to subscribe yet, do me a big favor and make this the video that you subscribe and hit that notification bell to turn on all notifications. If you don't do that, you're still gonna miss a ton of our videos in the future, even if you are subscribed. It's just how YouTube works. You can also hit me up on Twitter and Instagram at Anime Uproar. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, see ya, Space Cowboys.